Oh, hello, you fabulous bunch of people, and welcome back to the race rundown post Australia Grand Prix. Whoop, 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 whoop. One of my favourite tracks of the calendar. In fact, dare I say it, my favourite of the calendar. I love the vibes they bring. I love the fact that Danny Rick and Oscar Piastri are just on fire during their home races. Yeah. And I think we all know why I liked the Australian Grand Prix this year. I don't need to tell you. I don't need to tell you. We all watched it. If you're in the UK, like it was a bloody early start for all us F1 fans. I mean, I feel sorry for all the other people around the world that watch F1 that have to get up ridiculously early. I feel for you. I got up so early. I wasn't even expecting to wake up, to be completely honest. I set so many alarms. I thought for sure I was going to sleep through them. But no, I made it. I watched the race, and by God, am I glad that I watched this race. If you'd have told me the outcome of the race and I hadn't have watched it, I wouldn't have believed you. Genuinely, I wouldn't have believed you. Double DNF for Mercedes, Ferrari 1-2, and Max. Oh, okay, let's start with Max. Okay, we all know that my opinion on Red Bull and Max is that he needs to just stop winning all the time because it's boring. It was the same opinion that I had with LH at Mercedes. It's boring when the same person wins all the time. So imagine my surprise, F1 fans, when on lap 3 of the race, through my half-opened eyes at 4:30 in the morning, smoke, which I thought was just a mirage, a projection, if you will. I thought I was seeing things because I was tired. Smoke from the rear right of Verstappen's Red Bull. When I tell you that I was the happiest I've ever been. No, that sounds horrible. But I was. I'm going to be honest. I was the happiest I've ever been. It was a repeat of 2022? All over again. And I was so happy. I was so happy. So, as we all know, the brakes on the back rear right of the Red Bull were seized on at the beginning of the race in the lights, and Max managed. This isn't a hating Red Bull podcast, but you know, Max wins all the time and it's frustrating. But I will give credit where credit is due. Even with the brakes slammed shut on that rear right, Max managed to maintain position 1 for 3 laps. That, would do baby claps. That was pretty impressive. You know, how fast must that Red Bull be for it to still be in P1 off the lights with a brake seized on? That is truly, truly, truly incredible. But obviously, with this retirement of the Red Bull, it opened up a whole new ball game for everybody. Now, I was surprised to see Sainz back in the car. I'm happy he was back in the car. Obviously, you know, great recovery. But whatever they did when they took his appendix out, what did they do? I mean, how can you go from having appendicitis and having surgery, being replaced by an 18-year-old, to then come back and win the race? Like, I know we all joke that every driver's going to be getting their appendix out now, but I mean, Alex Albon had his out. He's performing pretty well this season, obviously, for a Williams. He's performing the best that he can. You know, it's Williams at the end of the day. No disrespect to Williams, but you don't expect them to be podium level, do you, really? But obviously then for Carlos to be like, here I am, I'm back, I'm winning races. And the cheek of it for him to stand in the post-race interviews and be like, I'm still out of a job next year. He's not wrong. That was his audition tape. That was his audition tape for Merc, for potentially Red Bull if Max leaves. And what better audition tape, you know? Finishing your race P1 after just having your appendix taken out. Like, I know there's lots of jokes flying around that he was under the weight limit. Fair. But at the same time, like, credit where credit is due, he bossed it completely. It was just absolutely unreal to watch. And for Carlos to be out of a job next year and still be ahead of Charles, who's staying, it makes you wonder whether at the lineup for next year and going, should we have kept Carlos instead? Yeah, as a lot of the pundits are saying, and even Charles and Lando in the post-race interviews, Carlos isn't out of his prime yet. You know, he can go on to win championships. He just needs the right car and the right seat. And I think that it is, quite frankly, a damn shame that Ferrari have got rid of him. I think that he had so much more potential within that team. Obviously, I understand from a financial perspective that getting Lewis Hamilton on board is going to do wonders for their marketing. Wonders for Ferrari as a whole. Half of Mercedes' profits have probably plummeted since the news. Everybody's sending their Mercedes merch back. Toto Wolff's crying because his bank account's now empty. His cash cow is leaving, taking half the sponsors with him, no doubt. But anyway, we'll have to see next year just how many sponsors Mercedes don't have anymore. I think Carlos has so much more to give. And I'm excited to see how he does for the rest of the season. I really am. I'm genuinely excited on how that's going to go. I think he has got that fire back, which I love. We saw a bit of it at McLaren in terms of his braking within the car and the confidence. And I think it just took him a while to warm up at Ferrari, right? And obviously now that they're getting rid of him, he's got nothing to lose, you know? And I think we saw that this weekend. He's got nothing to lose. Where do we think, let me know in the comments, where do we think Carlos is going to end up? I'm intrigued. Another, obviously, major issue with the Australian Grand Prix, one of the reasons that I like it so much is the heat. Melbourne is a dry heat, as my favourite podcast, Tony and Ryan, keep saying. Tony keeps proclaiming that Melbourne is a dry heat. We saw that in terms of tyre deg this weekend. And in part, I think that let down the Red Bulls. There was a lot of talk about how they'd lowered the front wing to protect the front tyres, and it was affecting the rear brakes and the rear tyres, which obviously we saw on Max's car. There was then speak about whether that was going to happen to Checo or not. There was a couple of other cars. I know Ocon's rear brakes were smoking a little bit in the pit lane. And I think that's half of what makes Melbourne what it is the fact that it's a fast track, it's difficult in terms of tyre deg, and you rely quite heavily on pit stops and undercuts and interesting pit strategies, which I think we saw with McLaren and Ferrari this time round, which we'll get into with team orders, obviously, with McLaren and Piastri, it being his home race and everything. I know that upset a lot of people. We saw quite a few undercuts from both sides, really, from McLaren and Ferrari. We saw that strategy sort of coming into play here. We'll get into the team orders, okay? We all know how I feel about team orders. I think that they're pointless, right? I think that racers, even if they're on the same team, should just be able to race. However, and I know what everyone's about to say, oh, well, she's a McLaren stan, she would say that. No. Okay, hear me out. Lando's tyres were 6 laps newer. He would have been wasting that fresh rubber behind Piastri when it made more sense for him to overtake. So I think, God forbid, don't get used to this. This is the first team order that made sense to me. In terms of strategy, it made sense to me. Did it upset a lot of people? Yes. Would I have liked to see Piastri on the podium at his home race? Yes. However, it did make sense. It did. It just did make sense. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it, though, but it did make sense. It did make sense. In terms of pitting, one of the major things that I think has caused major problems as well at the moment for, here we go, Kick Sauber. Not Steak F1, but Kick Sauber. That's what we're calling them from now on. They have a design flaw within their tyres with cross-threaded wheel nuts. They obviously then had to take their time with the pit stops, which Melbourne is quite pit stop heavy. There's lots, as I said, of pit strategies, because the tyre deg is so high, which then meant ridiculously long pit stops for Kix Alba and poor Valtteri. Poor Valtteri. Obviously there's Zhou as well, but poor Valtteri. That man has been going through it with pit stops. He's been going through it. God damn. Yeah. He's been going through it. But Kix Alba's been going through it. And another team, not to sound too joyful, that has been going through it at the moment is Mercedes. I can't say that I'm not happy about it. I think there's definitely been a humbling period. A fall from grace, if you will, for Mercedes and their direction that they've gone with the car. Obviously, in lap 17 of this race, boom, Mercedes engine completely failed. Lewis Hamilton out of the race. Now, he's clearly expressed his frustrations with Mercedes, not only in Drive to Survive, as we mentioned a couple episodes ago, but also in post-race interviews, in chats with outside sources, magazines, etc. And I can't help but feel like there is a little bit of, wah, poor me going on. I felt that for a while when it comes to Lewis. I know a lot of people are going to be angry with me saying that, but I feel like they took a risk with that car and now they're having to deal with the repercussions of that. I think there's a reason, obviously we'll never know, but there's a reason that the mechanics and the team at Mercedes didn't take his direction. I'm not sure if that's because they wanted to be innovators and try something new, and if it worked, be the best of the best and continue to get an 8th championship with this new idea and new plan. I'm not sure if it's just because there's been a lot going on internally and they've lost trust in Lewis. I don't know. Was that a contributing factor to him moving to Ferrari? Potentially. I think that the racing pedigree and the amount of money also had a massive contributing factor towards him leaving Merc and going to Ferrari. But that's, again, just my opinion. And I think Lewis is walking that very fine line at the moment of risking upsetting his team. Now, obviously, we all know that in 2025 it is official he will be racing in red, but he still has to spend an entire remainder of the season with Mercedes. And I feel like if he continues down this path of bad-mouthing the car, bad-mouthing the team, bad-mouthing everybody, there's going to be a very sour taste in people's mouths. And I can't help but feel like that's a negative mindset that he could potentially carry through to Ferrari. And I don't want to see that for him. Although I might sound like a Lewis Hamilton hater, I want to see him win his 8th. I really do. I think that the way he lost his 8th was very unfair. I think that that entire season and the judgments of Michael Massey and the FIA were completely off. Some favoured Lewis throughout the course of the season, others favoured Max, and I think ultimately the decision at the end of the day was not a great one. Was I happy about it at the time? Yes, but I think only out of frustration of the fact that Lewis kept winning consistently. In terms of fairness and the integrity of the sport, I think it trashed it completely. I feel like it just highlighted to everybody that it's no longer about racing, it's about money and making it interesting. They grabbed all the headlines, it skyrocketed Netflix, it skyrocketed everything because this story arc of the underdog and Lewis being knocked off the top spot really brought in that new wave of people. And I feel like it stirred up a lot of arguments, you know? It stirred up a lot of talk about whether he was robbed, whether it was fair, whether it was, you know, rigged or whatever. And I can see why he's frustrated, I really can. But at the end of the day, the team took a risk and it hasn't paid off. And for whatever reason, whether it was financial, whether it was just for their own testing, I don't know, they decided to go with that for this season too. Do I think that was a mistake? Yes. Do the results lie? Absolutely not. The fact that George is outperforming Lewis within this car suggests to me that maybe this new type of car was built. Oh, this is going to be a very unpopular opinion. I feel like potentially Mercedes have made a car that is potentially ahead of its time. And at this moment in time, they are just testing. And maybe we could see George winning a championship in this car in a season or two. Now, obviously, for George, he can wait a season or two. He has that time. Whereas Lewis is getting on a bit. You know, he's getting on a bit. Time's ticking. He wants to win his 8th. I get that. Will we see the story arc of him going to Ferrari, winning his 8th and retiring? I honestly don't know. I think he's in a multi-year contract at Ferrari. I think he'll finish that, and then there will be genuine discussions about whether he leaves or not. If he does retire, I don't think it will be the end. I think it will be an Alonso moment where he will disappear for a little while, and then he'll come back for another piece of the pie and continue his legacy, which, you know, love him or hate him on or off the track, Lewis Hamilton has built himself a legacy as one of the best racing drivers in the world. The 8th title would set him over the top of being the best. At the moment, he's obviously tied with Michael Schumacher, as you know, racing legend. And that 8th is what he would need to solidify himself as the best in the world at Formula 1. And obviously, as a competitor, he wants that. So love him or hate him, that is his legacy, and that is what he's here to do. I think he's more than capable in the right car, and the Mercedes is just not that car right now. And that's fine. That's completely fine. You know, the Mercedes is not that car right now. It could be in a season or two. We don't know. We'll have to see. There must have been a reason. You know, there must have been a reason that Mercedes went down that path. They wouldn't have got it that spectacularly wrong deliberately. You know, like maybe a little bit here and there, but they wouldn't have changed it completely if they didn't think they were capable of making it work. So, you know, again, it sounds like a bit of a conspiracy, but they could just be in the testing phase right now. As they keep pointing out, the car is the most important thing. Another key point from the weekend to do with cars, obviously, Alex Albon had his birthday. Happy birthday, Alex. You're not listening. I know you're not. But, happy birthday. His gift for the Australian Grand Prix was Logan Sargent's car. Now, I don't agree with this at all. I think it's completely unfair, and I feel like if Alex Albon crashed his car, he deserves not to race at the weekend. He should have been more careful. He should have looked after his car. I feel like even if he was the most likely to score points, I still think that Logan Sargent's car is Logan Sargent's car. It's souped up to suit him. The seat is made to suit him. And I think giving it to Alex was completely unfair. And I don't agree with it at all. I feel like he shouldn't have raced, basically. It's going to sound horrible, but he shouldn't have raced. He crashed his car, and Logan should have been out of race. He shouldn't have had to sit out, and I think it was unfair, and I don't agree with it whatsoever. I think, regardless of whether it was Alex's birthday or not, nobody gives a shit. It's not your car. It's not your car. If you fucked yours, you ain't driving mine, basically. I don't agree with it at all. Speaking of cars that are fucked, my final point before I move on to drama off the track is George's crash right at the end of the race. Very interesting that he was fighting for 6th, I believe, with Alonso, and crashed and ended up sideways in the middle of the track. Now, when I say to you that Formula 1 is a business, it is a business, right? They have to make money. But news headlines were out of control. George Russell flips car. The car didn't flip. It didn't flip. For anyone that didn't watch it or hasn't seen the clips on Instagram, YouTube, George's car did not flip. He hit it into a wall. The tethers of the tyres keeps the tyres attached. They tucked under the car. He ended up sideways in the middle of the track. Don't get me wrong, still a dangerous place to be. In the middle of the track, in the middle of a race on the final lap when everyone's going as fast as they can. I get it, it's dangerous, right? However, the car did not flip. Okay? The car did not flip. They red flagged the race. George was okay. However, the car did not flip. Everyone that was over dramatising it, it didn't flip. Calm down. Calm down. Calm your shit. Thank God he's okay. It was a bit of a gnarly crash. I just hate all the headlines that over dramatise everything. I hate it. I hate it. Yeah, double DNF for Merc. Which, for as long as I've been re-watching, obviously I watched as a kid. However, I would say probably 2020 was when I properly started watching again. I think that's the first time, I believe. I could be wrong. Somebody please in the comments let me know. I could be wrong. However, I think in recent times that is the first double DNF for Mercedes. Yeah, it must be. Again, if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. But yeah, that is mental. Absolutely mental. This is a new introduction for episode 5. We're going to do a little segment called Off-Track Drama. We're going to have an on-the-track race rundown and we're going to have an off-the-track drama because, my God, is there some juicy stuff going on in F1 right now. The biggest story that I want to talk about this week, and I think it will probably be the only story I'll talk about this week, I'm trying to keep the drama fairly limited because a lot of it is crazy, is the Helmut Marko drama. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this drama, so I came across an Instagram account called Formula God, or at Formula One God on Instagram, and they outlined the ongoing story that is going on with Helmut Marko right now and Red Bull. So apparently Helmut Marko is not allowed to speak to any press at all. This post says, a few hours ago, Helmut Marko spoke to ORF and said that there is a theoretical possibility that he'll be suspended. Now, if you're wondering why he might be suspended, allow me to flick through this post. Again, thank you at Formula One God for basically providing me with this information. I will put your shout out in the comments. Please go follow him on Instagram. He provides you with all the Formula One goodness. So, you may remember that a journalist broke the news of the Christian Horner investigation, right? And it turns out that Helmut Marko has been linked with various media links. Now, obviously Helmut Marko is of that age. He's slightly older. Maybe he just wants his minute to shine, you know? Like, he's very much designing the car in the background. Maybe he just wants to talk to some press. And maybe, just maybe, he wants to stir the pot a little bit. Let the man stir the pot. Let him give us what we want. You know? So anyway, Red Bull are investigating him for media leaks. But there's more, says Formula One God. At Helmut Marko has now been ordered by Red Bull to not talk to the media. Openly talking to the media could be seen as undermining authority, which could lead to his suspension. Helmut Marko, not 2 hours later, I love this, was seen speaking to Sky Germany. Fucks given equals none. I love this man. I love him. Formula One God then goes on to say, of course we need to see what Max has to say about the ongoing situation. Because Max is Max and everyone loves him and he's Red Bull's cash cow, basically. Max has stated that he cannot continue without Helmut Marko. Now, that's a very telling statement, considering the man could be literally on imminent suspension. And it's just been revealed that a source close to Red Bull has told the BBC that the team plans to suspend Helmut Marko. Now, he posted this on the 8th of March. However, as of the 26th of March, there has been no talk of this suspension whatsoever. None. There's been an article on Sky Sports stating that he's not going to be suspended, and also states that Max Verstappen has said his future depends on Marko staying in the team. Now, imagine if Mercedes just went, here you go, lad, have a bit of money, come work for us, and while you're at it, bring Max with you. Imagine. Toto would be rubbing his hands with glee. Now, obviously, there's been that rumour going around that Max could go to Mercedes, and as we said, there's no smoke without fire, right? So, do we think that he could go to Mercedes? I don't know. Obviously, they keep asking Toto if there's any possibility of Max joining them, and he said, I would love to know. He said the same thing about George. He said he wasn't sure. Him and George were like, oh, we're not sure. It could happen, it could not happen. Who knows? We all know. Okay, we all know. Just tell us what we want. We don't need to wait for silly season. Silly season started 4 races ago, before we'd even begun the racing, you know? So we don't need to wait for silly season. Just give us what we want, Toto Wolff. Tell us. Who is replacing Lewis? Because this is going to be a running story arc and a running, going rumour until you announce it. Kind of like with George. So just please, for the love of God, put us all out of our misery and just tell us now so that we can emotionally prepare for 2025, okay? Because, God forbid, if you do announce Max, we then need to know who the fuck is going to replace Max at Red Bull. And I swear to God, if it's Carlos, my brain is going to explode. Like, I'm not even joking, my brain is going to explode. Because, do not even get me started about Danny Rick and his potential to go back into a Red Bull. It will never happen. The man is washed up. I'm sorry, I love him as a person, as a racing driver, not so much. I swear, okay, if Carlos sits in a Red Bull, if I see any press images of Carlos in a Red Bull, I'm going to lose my mind, and we're going to have to do a whole episode on the history and the storyline of Carlos Sainz Jr. because that is next level. That is next level. To go from McLaren to Ferrari to freaking Red Bull, like, bruh. Anyway, that's besides the point. I'm getting very excited, as you can tell. So, on that note of being excited and looking forward to the future, of what our most favourite sport has to bring us, we have, if you are in the UK, yet another early start. On the 5th of April. So, the Easter weekend, we all get a break. Have a lie in. Chill out. 4 days. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Of just chill, fun times. You can still watch the highlights of F1 though. If you missed the sport for the weekend, you can still watch reruns. Just saying. However, we then have the Japanese Grand Prix from the 5th to the 7th of April. Race time, for those in the UK, 6 a.m. I can live with that. 6 a.m. is not that early. I can live with that. Especially after my 3:30 wake-up call this past weekend. So, 6 a.m. I can deal with. I will be there bright and early, coffee in hand, Weetabix in my bowl. Yes, I have Weetabix for breakfast, don't judge me. And I will be there. And I will be keeping notes, and I will be chatting to all my friends in our little F1 group chat. And we will be having a grand old time, and I hope that you have a grand old time watching too. And I hope that you come back and you listen to the race rundown post-Japanese Grand Prix. I will see you then. Have a lovely, lovely break. And I'll see you for the next race rundown.